Permjot is an entrepreneur, an investor, has been a startup coach for many, many years, and most importantly, he is the Goodwill Ambassador for the state of Arkansas. That's an actual title. He also happens to be our mentor in residence at OEI, and in a normal year, he visits several times a year and does these workshops in person and coaches students who are in some of our deeper programs like our new venture development program. You'll see why we invite him to talk to you about communicating, which is really a core skill for anyone who wants to create change in the world, whether that be through starting a venture or solving a problem or creating a new product or service. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to my friend Permjot.
Thank you so much. Now I'm distracted. I'm reading this and I'm really liking, Lydia, I'm liking your pre-physical therapy student. That is, the course is called pre-physical therapy student, or you are a pre-physical therapy student?
Pre-physical therapy student.
That is really interesting. That is really, really interesting. And there's supply management, PhD in material science. Wow. Doctoral candidate in public policy community development. So what's your thesis on, Meredith?
Hi, my dissertation is on the Community Reinvestment Act, specifically on institutional logics between sectors, specifically the market sector and the sort of development sector.
Oh, wow. Excellent, excellent. So this is one of those rare occasions, and this is one of the reasons why I love working with the University of Arkansas. It's the rare occasion where the person with the lowest IQ gets to lecture everybody else with higher IQ, as we can see from, and I must be the only Indian in the room who's not a doctor. So how often does that happen? Not very often. So welcome everybody. Welcome very much. Great to be here. And shall I get started? It seems a bit strange to. As you can tell from my accent, I'm not from here. I'm actually from Rogers. Boom, there you go. The name's Permjot Valia. I hope I pronounced that properly. And now I'm going to share my screen and going to get, yes, Deb, after all these years, it's still funny, isn't it? It still works. It still works. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about language. Just in case anybody has forgotten already, my name is still Permjot Valia, and I'm even on this thing that something me and the presidents don't share in common. I'm on Twitter, so you can find me on Twitter. So that's if any of you do wish to follow me, and that's the last reference to politics. I promise, the last reference to politics. But it was just too obvious. So language. So when I say language, what do I mean, and what am I talking about? So let's agree a definition. And am I speaking too loud, too fast? Everybody is good. Just Alexander, you're on my screen, as are you, Lydia. So I'm just going to look, if I could ask Alexander and Lydia, if you don't mind, just give me a thumbs up to let me know that you can hit. Thank you. So if you can hear me okay, that's great. Thanks, Alexander. And if there are any problems, just wave. And Stacey or Sarah, if there is any messages or any questions, please do let me know, just interrupt. If there are any questions, please interrupt through the text function rather than just speaking, because then it spoils the flow, etc. But please do ask questions as soon as you have a question or even a comment. And Stacey and Sarah will share those comments with me if anything pops up. So language is the method of human communication, either spoken, written, consisting of the use of words in a structured and conventional way. And sometimes we do hear lots of sentences and they are all words that we understand, but they're sometimes not put together in a manner which we would consider structured or conventional. And that can sometimes cause us real issues in understanding what is actually being communicated. So this is just a definition I'm going to work with. And I've committed the first cardinal sin of presenting, which is actually read. So don't do as I do, don't read from a presentation. And this is, as Stacey mentioned, this is all building up towards you feeling hopefully more confidence at the end around pitching. But you will enjoy this, and I think you'll really enjoy tomorrow, even if you're not going to pitch. So I hope we see as many of you as we can, both tomorrow and on Wednesday. So on Thursday, today is Tuesday. So let's delve into this a little bit more. Why is this concept relevant? Because all of us, we're doing some PhDs. We've heard from people doing masters in a doctoral thesis in public policy. So why is this relevant? Why are we talking about language at this stage? because sometimes we forget the basics of communication. And one of the things I notice is that people forget that language is needed to communicate very, very complicated ideas. We need language to excite people. We need language to motivate people. And often, most of you will always use the language at least 3 or 4 times a day to ask for a level of commitment from one or from anybody in your life in all manners of things. And yet we forget how relevant language is. I remember once I was involved in a restaurant business, and we had lots and lots of labor coming in from all over the world. It was a fantastic cosmopolitan place. And I remember somebody was giving it, one of the owners was giving a new member of the team who was from France instructions on how to make poached eggs. And he starts off by saying, well, the first thing you got to do is create a vortex. And the person who heard this word thought the person says, first you need to create 4 eggs instead of a vortex in the water. So and that was just a really simple example of where vortex, is that really the word you want to use in a restaurant to explain to somebody who's in the kitchen for the first time, you know, how to make poached eggs? We forget all the time the basics of using really, really good, solid, strong language to communicate and get across complicated ideas. So no questions, everybody is good. Everybody is good. Great. So the tips that I would say that can really help you improve your ability to use language to very powerful effect is Einstein's tip. Einstein said, be able to, if you can't explain something to a 6-year-old, it's because you don't understand it yourself. And I think one of the things often we hide behind, but as we get more and more professional, more and more achieve expert status, somehow we feel, and it's almost like this weird reverse insecurity, we feel somehow the need to use language which lets people know how smart we are. Whereas actually, if your job is to make people understand what you're saying, it doesn't really work. So Einstein had it powerfully nailed that you've got to be able to explain things to a 6-year-old. And there's this great saying, you can either be effective or the smartest person in the room. I remember, and it's your choice. I remember I was working with some lawyers, and I remember saying to the lawyers, you can either be the smartest person in the room or you can sell and be liked. You can't do both. And sadly for me, many of the lawyers opted, I think it's more important to be known as the smartest person in the room rather than be liked. So there are certain people you can't help, sadly, but there you go. And clearly you have to understand your audience. And one of the things people often really get this horrifically wrong is they simply don't understand why the audience is there. And sometimes it's your job to explain to the audience why they're there. So Stacey actually outlined that by, this is where we are, this is what's happening. And she created that structure immediately. So people felt safe, people were like, oh, I've arrived at the right place. So understand your audience and help your audience. And also understand what your objective is. So my objective today, in the time I have left with you, which is 50 minutes and counting down, is to hopefully impress upon you the need to use language, everyday language, to communicate really complicated ideas, but in a way that makes sense to all types of people. Now, there's an entrepreneur, Sarah, you may remember him, Patrick Hankinson, who's been to Arkansas a few times, and Carol, I know you've met Patrick Hankinson as well. Incredibly smart, but one of the things, very, very smart entrepreneur, incredibly smart entrepreneur. But one of the issues I always had struggling with him at the beginning was when I used to work with him on his pitch, he would say, I don't need everybody to understand my pitch. My pitch is designed for an audience who are quite technical. And I think the point all of us sometimes forget with that thinking is what you're trying to do with language is create an army of followers. You're trying to create supporters. And sometimes you might tell me something that is really, really complicated. And if I don't understand it, you've just lost me. Whereas if Lydia explains something to me in a way that I understand, I still can't help at all, but at least I understand what Lydia's doing. Then I'm having a conversation half an hour later with Steve Rice. And I say to Steve, actually, you need to talk to Lydia because I don't understand what she does, but she mentioned these kind of 3 or 4 words and you're mentioning the same words. You two should talk to each other. So language can be very powerful if said in a simple way that somebody you get this resonating effect. So, oh, I understand roughly what you're doing. Somebody who's very, very good, actually, and I won't embarrass, well, I am going to embarrass them. Somebody who's extraordinarily good at taking very complicated ideas and explaining them in a very interesting, exciting way is Sarah. I've actually seen Sarah go forth deliver presentations on science, and she does it in a brilliant way. And I think what's really interesting is when you ask most scientists why they chose science, they say they had a brilliant teacher. It's interesting how many of you are on this call right now, that if I trace your interest in what you're doing to today, it's somewhere along the line, a really great communicator played a role in who you are today. And when you just take a second to think about that, that's quite incredible that you're here now doing what you're doing because a great communicator somewhere along the line, it could have been a parent, could have been a sibling, could have been a relative of the family, or a teacher, most likely a teacher, inspired you to follow the path you're on. Simplicity, important concept. There are different ways of communicating. So I'm just going to move across to other people. So I want to start picking on you people. So get ready to be picked on. So one of the things you've got to do is think about language and think about what kind of language you're using, because we often take things for granted. So Kennedy, you know that thing that you go along the road on, what's that called? What would you call one of those things?
Car.
Car. Alexandria, what would you call those things? Another word. Give me another word for.
I don't know. A vehicle?
A vehicle, great, a vehicle, perfect. Kyle Wiggers.
An automobile.
Automobile, great. Molly, give me a word for one of those.
A transportation device.
Oh my goodness, love it. Robert Moore, can you give me more? Robert, can you live up to your name and give me more? Give me one more.
Yeah, I'm gonna get specific. Truck.
I like it. You must be from Arkansas, Robert.
Idaho.
Idaho. I love the fact you're wearing your geography on your sleeve. Love it. Truck. So now all those words we heard, they describe the same thing, but are they formal? Are they semi-formal? Are they informal? Or are they slang? Now, somebody said motorized vehicle, transportation vehicle. That to me sounds formal. Semi-formal, automobile sounds semi-formal, but it's, not as formal as transportation device, but it's still, you wouldn't use it in everyday language. What would be informal? I think car. And yet the first words we heard to describe it from Kennedy was car. So that would be informal. Now, what's slang for one of those? Anyone give me
Someone in the comments said my whip.
My whip.
Yeah.
Wow, I've never heard that before. So thank you very much. And
glad to help out.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Is that Brandon?
Yes, sir.
Brandon, thank you. Oh, see, I love you Americans. You always say sir and ma'am. I just love that. I can't get enough of that. English.
My family's British, so they helped out a little bit.
Your family's British?
Yes, sir.
Well, I think they clearly loved you and took you to America. So that's all I can say. So my parents didn't love me enough. They took me from India to England. They could have kept going. So we have slang. So my whip. So in England, we have this weird thing in London. I don't know, Brandon, if you've heard of Cockney. Cockney is a way of speaking in East End of London, and everything has to rhyme with everything else. It's just bizarre. So in England, jam jar is the word for car. So if you say, "Oh, have you got your jam jar?" That means where's your car? It's a weird, different style of speaking. And it's hilarious, and the fun we can have, and if we have time at the end, we can go through all kinds of Cockney language. So for example, one of the words I always used as a kid growing up, because I grew up in London, was you would always describe your friend as me China. So if you're a really good friend of mine, say, "Oh, he's me China," and I never knew what that meant, but you would call your best friend, "Oh, he's me old China, he's my China." And it's because it's China plate rhymes with mate. And so again, and you might have seen the movie Ocean's 11. There's a bit of Cockney in Ocean's 11 where I think Don Cheadle is pretending to be a Cockney, and he says, "There's going to be a lot of Barney here tonight." And Barney rhymes it. Barney, the famous Barney, is Barney Rubble, which rhymes with trouble. So he even uses it in Ocean's 11. So anyway, it's a different language altogether, but we won't go into that today. So are you using formal, semi-formal, informal, or slang? Most of us feel, especially if we're giving dissertations, or if we're doing defending theses, or if we're doing something like a job interview, we always feel like using formal or semi-formal, whereas actually it's proven time and time again the best language to use, unless you're trying to explain something which is highly technical and accuracy is of the utmost importance, which is maybe 3% of the conversations we have. We should use informal. We should use the word that Kennedy used, which is car. Because when I say car, we all understand what is meant. Whereas most of us are still tempted to always go into, you know, semi-formal or formal. And then it just sounds weird. So if I said, oh, Kennedy, what's that thing over there? And she said, it's a motorized transportation device. It would just be odd. And yet we do that all the time when we talk about the work we do. So think about how could you explain it again to a 6-year-old? A 6-year-old would understand car. You know, they wouldn't understand motorized transportation device. I mean, they'd say, do you mean car? Okay, that's great. So how do you best understand? And use language, because again, remember I said about get people to follow you. And there's this great book I read, which 9 myths about work, which was on Bill Gates's list of books for 2019, I think. And he talks, one of the myths is that there's no such thing as leadership. The argument was there's no such thing as leadership. You're only a leader if you have followers. And you only have followers if you can use language that excites people, that language that people can access. The reason why we still listen to Shakespeare's words in Susie, friends, Romans, lend me your ears, it's because it's such a powerful, powerful, powerful oratory example of using very simple language to convey extraordinary complex ideas. So language, we look at people like John F. Kennedy, Winston Churchill, Martin Luther King. Their oratory was superb, and they used things like visual imagery, and they also used this thing where they would use audio signals, they would use visual signals, and they would use feelings to get every type of person, no matter what your style of listening, to get you excited. One of the best speeches you'll ever hear is the inauguration, the John F. Kennedy inauguration speech of 1960. It's just if you break it down sentence by sentence, is, I think, perfection. So the best orators use very powerful and very, very simple language. Interesting trivia fact, John F. Kennedy was also the fastest ever public speaker on record so far. He said he used more words per minute than any other leading public figure. I'm listening to Barack Obama's book, A Promised Land. It's about 30 hours on audio. And I think if John F. Kennedy had narrated, it would have taken about 12 hours. So you can tell the difference in their speech. So how many words should you use? We remember speeches with very few words. The Gettysburg Address is referred to again and again because of how few words were used. I think it's about 160 words or something. It's a very, very short address. But critically, they are the right words. And that's what it's about. It's not about the quantity of words. It's the quality of the words. And you can say so many. Muhammad Ali was once asked, what is the most powerful short poem he knows? And he said, he was talking to students in London University, and he said, me? We. And that to him was the most powerful poem he'd ever heard. And just think, that's 2 words, me, we, and yet it conveys everything you need. But they're the right words. And the other thing is, you know, obviously I've got some issues with lawyers. You can tell that lawyers are paid by the hour by the amount of words they use. So that's a really good example. If you're using more words than a lawyer, something somewhere is going wrong. Use few words, use powerful words, and most importantly, use simple words. So let me give you an example of how not to do it.
So I gather you denied that Mr. Halifax's phone had been bugged.
Well, obviously. It was the one question today to which I could give a clear, simple, straightforward, honest answer.
Yes. Unfortunately, although the answer was indeed clear, simple, and straightforward, there is some difficulty in justifiably assigning to it the 4th of the epithets you applied to the statement. Inasmuch as the precise correlation between the information you communicated and the facts, insofar as they can be determined and demonstrated, is such as to cause epistemological problems of sufficient magnitude as to lay upon the logical and semantic resources of the English language a heavier burden than they can reasonably be expected to bear.
Epistemological? What are you talking about?
You told a lie.
A lie?
A lie.
What do you mean, a lie?
I mean, you lied. Yes, I know this is a difficult concept to get across to a politician. Yes, you did not tell the truth.
You mean we are bugging you, Halifax telephone?
We were.
We were? When did we stop?
17 minutes ago.
Well, you can't call that lying.
What would you call the opposite of telling the truth?
Well, I mean, there was no intent. I didn't mean to deceive them. I'd never knowingly mislead the House.
Nonetheless, you have done so.
It wasn't my fault. I didn't know he was being bugged.
Prime Minister, you are deemed to have known. You are ultimately responsible.
Why wasn't I told?
The Home Secretary might not have felt the need to inform you.
Why?
Perhaps he didn't know either. Or perhaps he'd been advised that you did not need to know.
Well, I did need to know.
Apparently, the fact that you needed to know was not known at the time that the now known need to know was known. And therefore, those that needed to advise and inform the Home Secretary perhaps felt that the information that he needed as to whether to inform the highest authority of the known information was not yet known. And therefore, there was no authority for the authority to be informed because the need to know was not at that time known or needed.
What?
We did not know that you would deny it in the House.
Well, obviously I would if I didn't know and I were asked.
We did not know that you would be asked when you didn't know.
I was bound to be asked when I didn't know if I didn't know.
It was thought that it was...
So I'll stop it there, but that is just my favorite comedy of all time. It's called Yes, Prime Minister, and Yes, Minister. That sketch is something like 40 years old, 35 years old, and it just hasn't dated at all. It just hasn't dated. I hope you enjoyed that, but that's a really, really interesting way of demonstrating how not to do it, because in the beginning, he actually just says, you lied. But he didn't say that he used a very flowery, complicated language to say you lied. And and they, in every single episode, they have a scene like that. And you think somebody has worked miracles to actually make the language that complicated. But it's very, very powerful. And when you get the time, please do watch. I'm slightly biased because I just love Yes, Prime Minister. And I hope you learn from that. I know we're all laughing, but there is some bit of you that when you're talking about your areas of work, I bet to a layperson, you do sound like that civil servant sounded. So just watch how you sound. And again, the golden rule, Einstein, the golden rule, 6-year-old. So one of the things I talked about is about being smart versus effective. The reality is we don't actually warm to people who want to be the smartest person in the room. I think it was President Eisenhower. I love talking to Americans about American history, but I think it was Eisenhower who said, you can tell he wasn't from New York because he didn't want everybody to know he was the smartest person in the room. And I just thought that was a very, very interesting statement for Eisenhower to say, yeah, you could tell he wasn't from New York. We just don't warm to people who want to be the smartest person in the room. One of the things I love about coming from England is I love insults where you have to think about the insult just delivered. I remember asking somebody, oh, what do you think of that person? And I remember them saying to me, you know, he's a self-made man and he's in awe of his creator. And I thought that was just such a delicious insult. And you had to think about it. But again, it was because this person just wanted everybody to know how smart they were. And often what happens is even if they're right about something, we don't like them. So we try to say, because I don't like you, I'm going to discount all the great things you're saying. We actually stop listening to people like that. So always think about, are you using language that makes people like us? Because if you want to get the commitment, remember what the objective is of whatever communication you're using. If you remember what the objective is to get things done, you need buy-in. And to get buy-in, you need to be liked. There is a reason why people like Jeff Bezos and others want very, very short paragraphs and don't want long-winded memos. I was listening to something. If any of you haven't listened to it yet, you must listen to it. And I think it actually was a University of Arkansas student who posted it on LinkedIn that I follow. It was Charlie Munger's talk about it was a talk he delivered in 1995. And it's about the 24 things about human misjudgment. If you all bear with me, I will get the link posted in the chat box. And it's a 1 hour, 16-minute talk. And it is just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I just couldn't believe how fresh it sounded. And this is a talk that he delivered 16 years ago. And the audio is terrible and everything, but it's just well worth the effort. Charlie Munger, it's about the 24 human misjudgments, why we are prone to keep making mistakes. But to be liked, use friendly, accessible, informative language. Understand your audience is very, very, very important. Why are they there? What do they want? And something you've always got to do is you've got to sometimes, I remember when I went for, when I became a manager for the first time in my career, many, many years ago, I became a manager, I was given job interview training and I was trained on how to interview staff. And I remember being absolutely petrified about doing interviews. And it was very interesting for me thinking, I am more nervous interviewing someone than the person being interviewed. And then I found out it was actually very common that most people, when they're doing their first 4 or 5 interviews, they're more nervous than the candidate. So you've got to think about, how does the audience want to feel at the end of the presentation? And you will have a big say in how they feel, by the language you use, by how you use those words. I started learning the Italian language, and I joked that learning the Italian language was easy, but learning all the hand signals that went with every single word was difficult. But there's something about that. I've never seen an Italian person speak without emotion or expression. You kind of know just by looking at them what they're saying, or if they're happy or if they're sad, whatever. You've got to think about, how do people want to feel, and do your words, does your slides, does everything about how you're communicating, does your memo create that feeling? Because sometimes you've got to start at the end. You've got to remember that great movie, The Usual Suspects, and how the movie starts at the end. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful movie in terms of, you really know, the director, Bryan Singer, knows exactly how he wants the audience to feel at the beginning and at the very end. So you've got to put some thought and show your audience some respect about how you want them to feel. I remember there was one time I was speaking in a big conference, and I was very nervous because it was a huge conference and I was the second speaker and it was huge. And the first person to speak, he gets up on stage and the first thing he says is, "Please bear with me, it's been some years since I last delivered this presentation." As soon as he said those words, I knew my presentation was going to be a cakewalk, because he had just alienated the audience entirely. He had said basically to this big gathering, I haven't been bothered to actually, look at the presentation update. Now, when you all went on, Stacey and I spent a lot of time making sure the audio worked, the video worked, and we had a few scares about that. And would it work? As soon as you come on, would my screen be on? Little things like that tell you all that I am interested, I am engaged, I am respecting your time. It didn't take me a lot to do. It took us probably 3 minutes, 4 minutes. And if you think about 50 people being on this call, for every 1 minute I take of your time, I'm actually taking 50 minutes of your time. So it's a really unfair ratio. So you've got to have that kind of level of respect for the audience and think, well, how do I achieve that? How do I make them feel the right way at the end of the presentation? So very, very critical that you do understand your audience before you start any presentations. Too many people use PowerPoints, and I love PowerPoint. This is a PowerPoint. PowerPoint's not the enemy, but the way we construct PowerPoints is the enemy. And what happens is we stop using it as a visual aid and we start using it as a visual master. And it's like, I've got to get through the slides. I've got to get through the slides. I've got 3 more slides. Tell the story. And if the slides help you in telling the story, great. If they don't worry about it. Relax. Understand your objective. Is it to get another meeting? Often when people are doing cold calls or when they're trying to speak to somebody, all they're trying to do is get another meeting. If you're trying to get another meeting, what's very funny, and there's that great Seinfeld sketch where somebody calls and then he says, "So are you telling me all this so you can have a meeting, so you can tell me everything you just told me on the phone again?" People do that all the time. So just think, actually, the only objective you have often is to get a meeting. That's it. So think about, well, what do I have to do to get another meeting? You've got to, and people sometimes think, and we've seen this all the time. I know Dr. Reeves, Dr. Reeves is on the call as well. I know Dr. Reeves and I have had our fair share of people who are pitching to us all the time, but they're not getting to the point of wanting another meeting. And they think, if we badger you enough, if I just pitch you enough, and if I actually pretend I'm asking you a question, but actually I'm pitching, they think they'll somehow succeed in getting another meeting. All they've done is alienate us and think the last thing I'd want to do is spend another minute of my time with you. I'm not getting that time back. So think about that. Is it to excite? And if you are trying to excite, think about what you have to do to get people excited about your project, about the mission. Enthuse, inspire. One of the things that often people have to do when they're in an organization, especially at the very, very early stages, you have to inspire. One of the things, I've read a great book called Blitzscaling, and one of the management transitions you have to make is to go from inspiration to data, where initially you have to inspire people, and then later the decisions have to be replaced from your personal inspiration to data points. But at the beginning, it's really, really important that you are able to inspire people to do stuff that they believe in you. And you need to understand if your objective is to get a level of commitment, and how will you measure that commitment? And think about the language you would need to use to commit. How would you structure it? So start with the end in mind. Often people just start with, I need to tell you all of these things. Not, I think you would enjoy hearing these things because at the end of this, you will be able to do X, Y, and Z. People often don't think about this, but people often, when they're structuring talks, when they're thinking about talking to anybody, they are often thinking about saying, I need to tell you this. I need to make sure that you understand this. How about we do it the other way? Are there any questions at all? Stacey, Sarah, any questions, any comments, anything? Nothing, not even from Molly, not even from Molly. No questions from Molly. Bombonato. Molly, very disappointed. Alexander Luelf, is there any questions from you? So I'm going to now tell you a very powerful technique I learned that I really hope works. I really hope there's Meredith Adkins, if you had a question, what would that question be?
If I had a question for you?
Yeah.
If I had a question right now, I was just reflecting on, as you were talking the whole time, how to communicate my dissertation in simpler language, given that I just wrote, a whole section on epistemology in the dissertation. But also, just when the topic is complicated, just, how to kind of speak to two audiences, both academics who are kind of expecting a higher level of terminology, but also academics who may be in a different, sort of a different research field and may not be that familiar anyway. So it still would make sense to speak, at the basic level. That's kind of what was going through my head. Brilliant,
brilliant. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to ask Isaac Wilman. Isaac Wilman, I can see you, Isaac, and I can see you seeing me. So,
yes, sir.
And there you go, Isaac. And there's Grey Church as well. Great. I know your sister White. How's your sister White Church? She's lovely. So there's Grey Church. Grey, if you and Isaac could do me a favor, and this exercise, I'm just gonna, if I could ask you both to just do this exercise. Everybody else just think about it, but I'm gonna actually pick on Isaac and Grey to, if you don't mind, if you could do that for me in a couple of minutes. But one of the things I did there was, again, using some of the things about the language. This is something somebody taught me in South Dakota, never ask an audience. Are there any questions? Austin, do you have a question? Don't say that. Say it to Austin. Austin Burgess. Is it Burgess or Burgess?
You were right the first time. It's Burgess.
So what I would say is, Austin, if you're not from Texas by any chance, are you?
No, but if only I was.
Okay. Austin, if you did have a question, so what I've done is I've taken the pressure off you by saying, if you did have a question, so now you feel, oh, there's no pressure on me. What would your question be? So Austin, if you did have a question, what would your question be?
Well, to answer that wonderful postulation, it'd be how to use this more effectively in day-to-day conversation versus more formal presentations and proposals and things like that.
Brilliant question, Austin. Thank you so much. And somebody taught me this technique, always say to people, if you did have a question, what would your question be? And it really works. It's so powerful. I've yet to see it not work. But there's always be a first, so please don't be the first. Austin, you asked a great question, and I think what you've got to do is really consciously start thinking about how you use language. One of the weird things is when you're doing public speaking, you understand why people think time travel is possible. Because if you're on a stage and there's a delay of a millisecond, in your mind, that is eternity. So whenever you're doing public speaking, you experience time travel because the audience don't even know that there's been a millisecond delay before your next word, but you feel hours have gone by. So what you have to do is integrate this. And one of the things people always feel wrongly is that they're under pressure to come up with words. Actually, if you pace your words and take pauses, think about what you're saying, you come across as more engaging, you come across as more intelligent, and you come across as someone who's actually having a conversation with someone. And if you're struggling to actually have your message understood, I found a very powerful technique is to just slow down. Don't repeat the same thing. That doesn't work because then that just looks patronizing. But slow down in how you take messages and respond and show people that you're actively listening to them and then respond. That is really, really powerful to just really try to actually converse. So I really like the question, Austin, and my challenge to all of you on this call is to start integrating some of these concepts into everyday life, as in, I'm going to make an effort to communicate more effectively. And the way I'm going to do that is by using simple words. Think about the words I'm going to use. Think about what I'm trying to get out of this conversation. The reality is many conversations don't need to happen. Let's be honest. So when the conversations that do happen occur, make them count. So thank you very much. So Gray, are you there? Gray Church, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Such a cool name, by the way, Gray Church. That is so cool.
Thank you.
So Gray Church, can you in less than a minute explain what you learned from your last brilliant lecture?
Yes. Give me a moment. I have to think about what it was. I actually yesterday I watched a video for one of the courses I'm taking, program evaluation. The speaker was Dr. Feinstein. It was a TED Talk, and he really got me to think about rather than try to impart knowledge, rather than think that when we're doing research, rather than start from ignorance to try to find knowledge, we should actually reverse it, to think of the fact that as we gain knowledge, we should realize the questions that are left unasked. In other words, knowledge should lead to ignorance, not in a negative sense, but the fact that there is so much more for us to know. It was so freeing to me because I'd been kind of like in a vapor lock about trying to decide my research question. I thought I had to come up with a deep, mysterious question and answer it fully and completely without any doubt. And now I realize all I need to do is perform research with a question, but it's still all right for questions to remain after I have found some truth that might lead to additional questions. How's my time?
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. I love the point you made, and I think you had everybody mesmerized. And I think what I also liked about what you said was, given the nature of most people's subject area, I think what you spoke spoke to and was relevant to a lot of the audience here. So thank you very much, Gray. That was really, really good. It's really interesting. I think again, I think it was Lincoln. I mean, everybody these days, it's very trendy to say Lincoln said this. So I don't know. I wasn't there when Abraham Lincoln said it, but apparently he said something like, "Isn't it strange how cocksure the most stupid people are, and how full of doubt intelligent people are?" And if Ian O'Rourke, you like that? Was it Abraham Lincoln who said that, or was it someone else? Ian, was it you?
I'm not sure, but it's I agree with that statement.
Beautiful, thank you. And Ian, I love your backdrop. Does it say "Welcome Ian"? Have you just written to yourself "Welcome Ian"? Is that what
yes, I did. I wanted to welcome myself too.
I think we all welcome you, Ian. We all welcome you. So thank you for joining us on this.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. So Isaac, are you still there, Isaac?
Yes, sir.
Isaac, can you do the same thing that Gray did?
No.
Oh, you can, Isaac. I have confidence in you. Give it a go. Give it a go.
Think of the last brilliant. I'm trying to think of the last lecture that I went on.
Well, clearly it wasn't brilliant. If you have to think about it. What was the last time you went, or it could be a YouTube talk. It could be something that you went.
So like, do you mean like as far as like, I guess like the language that was used in the lecture?
Anything that it just spoke to you. You heard something or somebody said something and it spoke to you and you're like, oh, I got that. And then what I want you to do is just like Gray did, I want you to transfer that moment of brilliance to all of us on this call.
Let me see.
Isaac, I don't like putting anybody on the spot for too long, so I will come back to you, but I am going to come back to you because I do want you to do that. But I'm going to come back to you on that, yeah? So we're going to come back to you. So, and because
Permjot, we have a volunteer. I'm sorry to interrupt you,
oh,
but I didn't
wow,
know if
we have
you...
a volunteer. So I'm going to do stop share. I'm going to do stop share, and I'm going to do stop share, and then I'm going to do, I want to see everybody because I like seeing everybody. Yeah, I can see everybody now. Perfect, perfect. Woo! Kennedy. Where's Kennedy? Kennedy Dolan.
Yeah, I'm right here.
We're with, and Isaac, you still keep working on it, Isaac. You still got to do this, okay?
Okay.
Otherwise you will burn.
So mine was, I had to watch a TED Talk for my leadership class, and the TED Talk we watched, I can't remember the speaker, but he was basically a counselor at the university, and he just went around and spoke to people, and he was giving people suckers or lollipops, and he was like, hey, are you having a good day? Like, how are you? And he gave one to this one girl, and I guess she was very undecided on where she wanted to go, what she wanted to do. But because someone took time out of their day to like give her this sucker and like personally speak to her and see how she was doing. So the lecture was called like your lollipop moment. So then we had to go and decide what our lollipop moment was that made us decide, you know, where we want to go to school, what we want to do. So that kind of stuck with me.
And what's brilliant about that is it is so simple. And whenever you say lollipop, it's so interesting. Now, you know, in the school, what do you call those people that, you know, make sure the school children cross the road from one side of the road to the other side? What are they called? You know, children in the mornings, they are there at school.
Crossing guards.
Crossing guards.
Yeah, that's it. There you go, Ian. But in Canada, we call them the Crosswalk Guard. Do you know what they're called in England? The lollipop lady or the lollipop man. Because it looks like a lollipop. And it's language that kids love. Oh, look, there's a lollipop lady. Oh, look, there's a lollipop man. Yeah. Look, it's the Crosswalk Guard. It doesn't quite have the same. And that's a really good example where language can be so powerful and yet simple, really simple. And that's a really great example where I have an emotional reaction to somebody saying, there's the lollipop lady or there's the lollipop man. I have an emotional reaction because it makes me feel like a kid again. Whereas Crosswalk Guard makes me just feel, you know, I mean, it describes the job, but you know, that's that. So thank you very, very, very much. Isaac, we're counting down. You've still got time. You've still got time, Isaac. You let us know when you're ready. So now I'd like to ask you, we've got 10 minutes and this is my favorite bit, where I'm going to ask you all to ask me some questions and just chime in and say whatever you want to see. Cannon, great to see you, Cannon. Great to see you. Good to see you, Cannon. Yeah, so who's got a question for me? Otherwise, I'm going to start picking on you, and nobody wants that. Nobody wants that.
I have a question, Permjot.
Sarah, and then we're going to go to Prathamesh. Yes. Prathamesh. So Sarah, and then Prathamesh.
Okay, I'm asking on behalf of my students who I know are here. We have some folks who are preparing to pitch to investors. And a lot of times I get the question, I don't know how to know my audience because I don't know these people. So I'm wondering what your top tip is for, or maybe the best pitch that you've ever heard for investment. What do you remember about it?
Ooh, this is terrible. This is terrible because the best pitch I ever heard broke all the rules. It broke every single rule. So, you know, you have never ask the audience, when you're pitching, never ever ask a question, never ask a question because you lose. So, you know, if you said, have you ever noticed, did you know that in the time it takes to, how many of you, no, never ask a question like that. But this person, it was at an investor's presentation, and he asked Enda McCarthy, I'll never forget the name. This was like 20 years ago. It was a group of local angel, and there were about 8 companies pitching, and he was the 6th company to pitch. And he comes on the stage and he goes, could everybody please stand up? So he gets all the investors to stand up. So he's broken all the rules already. Those of you who are here representing a company or here to support a company, also looking to pitch, could you please sit down? If you're here as a sponsor or as a broker or as an advisor or one of the sponsors, thank you so much for your support. But if you don't mind, could you take a seat as well? Great. If any of you have never invested in the startup, which is in the B2C space, could you also please take a seat? And there are about 4 people left standing. And he says, hi, my name is Enda McCarthy, and I help make sure your message only gets through to the people that you really want to communicate to. And I'd love to buy the 4 of you a drink, and maybe we can talk afterwards. Oh, drop the mic, off he goes. Wow, broken all the rules, but highly effective, highly effective. There is somebody here who pitched to me, and that I successfully, and I think that's Cannon. And I think what Cannon did was Cannon just was tenacious. He found out, him and his partner in crime, Peyton, they found out, I think they popped in to see Deb at the office and said, have you seen Permjot? And they said, oh, I think he's gone for a coffee. And then they turned up to the coffee shop. I was only there for like 2 days in Arkansas, and he turns up to the coffee shop and says, right, here's the presentation. I said, right. So then I went and saw Jeff, and I think you raised the money that afternoon. Because there are little things that they will do that. Now, most investors, one of the things you've got to do is, before you get disheartened, find out if the investors actually do invest. So find out their track record, what kind of companies have they invested in. There's loads of things you can do to find out what the audience are like. So angels will often tell you, investors will tell you, this is my track record. Do they invest in your kind of companies? The other great advice I've been given is, don't ask for advice. If you're looking for money, don't ask for money, ask for advice. And if you're looking for advice, don't ask for advice, ask for money. And there is some truism to that. There is some truism. And one of the things you can often do when talking to investors is, I know you don't normally like to invest in these kind of deals. So what I'm really hoping is, because I know your networks are extensive, I'm hoping that you can suggest other people that would like to invest in something like this and why they would like to invest. Another thing that I found very powerful with investing is there's the kind of reverse psychology. Some of the most powerful pitches I've heard are people who disarm you at the beginning. Let me tell you the 3 reasons why you may consider not investing in this sector. Number 1, this sector is showing signs of maturity and declining. So increasingly, people won't win by growing market, they'll win by grabbing market. And for a lot of investors, that isn't exciting. Another reason why you might consider not investing in this is our team is still relatively young, and the industry dominant players at the moment are but we believe that gives us certain advantages, but a lot of people don't agree with that. The third reason that you may not want to invest in us, because if you do this, it sounds a bit weird and totally counterintuitive, but the weird thing is, if you're doing a brilliant pitch, and sometimes being a brilliant presenter can be a massive disadvantage, genuinely, it can be a massive disadvantage to you. Because if you're doing a brilliant pitch, I'm thinking, what's the catch? And I'm playing this intelligent game because I'm really smart. I'm really smart. So I've got to catch you out. So my job is to catch you out. So I'm just trying to think. Whereas if you do that work for me by telling me at the very beginning, these are the 3 reasons you might not want to invest in me, or 2 reasons. Suddenly I'm thinking, oh, yeah, those were the 3 reasons I would have come up with. So I'm now going to listen. It's really interesting. It's really interesting. Let me tell you why you might not like this. But so how many times have salespeople done that to you? How powerful, and they do it very subtly, and it really works. Sarah, you might not want to buy this thing. And I'll tell you why I don't think you want to buy this thing. I do want to buy that. I think I could use it. Oh, if you insist. Don't say I didn't warn you. Psychologically, it works. It really works. And there's this thing, again, the Charlie Munger talk about the 24 human misjudgments. It's amazing how often when you tell somebody they can't have something, they really want it. And most investors do have egos. So use that to your advantage. I hope that was a long-winded way of answering that question, but I hope that was useful. And now over to my friend Prathamesh Bandekar. Have I said it properly?
Yes, you did.
And where are you from, Prathamesh?
I am originally from India, but I...
Whereabouts in India? India's a big country. Whereabouts?
Mumbai.
Mumbai, I can't speak. I was going to speak with you in Hindi, but I can't do that because, you know, Mumbai, you speak a different language, don't you? So how can I help you, sir?
Yeah. So
I missed the
you mentioned or you stressed that we have to use the right words. Can you hear me now?
I can, yeah.
So you stress that we have during the presentations, we have to use simple language, right words, but sometimes, especially in science, it's difficult to avoid scientific jargons. So
Give me an
in
example.
such cases, how?
Give me an example. No, give me an example.
So in my field, which is life cycle assessment, we usually mention what kind of life cycle assessment study it is, if it is attributional or consequential.
Okay. Why is that distinction important?
Because in attributional LCA, you assign all inputs to one product and the supply chain of that product without evaluating any impact of changes in demand for that product. In consequential LCA,
and the other one?
Right, in consequential LCA, you evaluate how demand for changes to that product would impact rest of the market.
Okay, so I don't know anything about what you just said, but I think what you're saying is there are two ways of thinking about X, whatever the word you use. There's two things. One says that all of the changes are due to changes in demand and that the supply chain must follow from that. The other way of looking at it, though, is that actually it's all the changes in the supply chain that lead to that. Sometimes think about not the words. I don't know if I got that right or not, but did I get that right at all?
Yes.
Oh, great. So the point is, I didn't even understand half of what you said, but I understand the point you were trying to make. And sometimes we get carried away in terminology, whereas actually the terminology isn't important, because the point you were trying to make is one school of thought in supply chain says the demand, changes in demand will impact da. The other thing is the other way around. You know, think about the point you're trying to make, and if you're really talking to a very technical person, yes, you can use technical language. If it's now, what I'm not asking you to do is go in with your professors tomorrow and start using, I came here in my jam jar, and no, not at all, not at all. Language has to be appropriate. You wouldn't use that kind of language, but most people just want to communicate in a really bizarre, really normal language. One of the things that shocked me about the Barack Obama book, especially hearing Barack Obama's narrating it, is how often he talks about people in the White House swearing. I just had this image that you would never swear in front of the president. Like, you just wouldn't use words like that. And to hear Barack Obama swearing about, and then I said, what? So what that tells me is swearing's never good. Swearing's never good. Swearing is like, you really don't have use of the vocab, right? And he's an extraordinarily learned man. I think nobody could accuse him of not being aware of vocab available. But I think the point is that we still use language in a way that is when the president is talking about complicated issues like the economy in a free fall, they're using everyday language. They're not using what I assumed would be highfalutin language. So Brahmadesh, I'm challenging you. I'm challenging you to say, forget the words. Remember the point you're trying to make and think, how can I make this point in a way that gets other people excited? Brandon, you've raised your hand. Brandon, raise your hand. Brandon, see, there's the English. There's the English. I'm going to take a line up in the queue and I'm going to wait my turn. Brandon, it's your turn.
All right. So for me, I have been discussing with investors, but we haven't gone to the pitch phase. And so I was wondering whether it would be more effective for us to introduce our product and then let them know about what problems it solves, or introduce the problem and then introduce the product and tell them how it solves it.
I'm going to tease you with, are you here tomorrow?
No, I don't think so. I don't think I signed up for that one, but I can.
Hopefully there's still some slots available. I don't know, Stacey. I don't know. I think we tried to cut it off, didn't we? So I'm trying to induce scarcity.
Yeah, I think I signed up for almost all of the events besides maybe that one. So it's kind of rough.
So Brandon, I am actually going to work with you on Thursday, and
okay.
I want you to come to the one tomorrow. Tomorrow is really good fun. No, genuinely, it's one of my favorite presentations. It's about Pixar, and we just use Pixar as the basis for storytelling, because Pixar is best storytellers on the planet. The fact that they've had so many hits, hit after hit after hit, they clearly know what they're doing. And Brandon, to your point, I talk about how can we use those techniques to tell powerful stories that get people excited. And then the third workshop that we run on Thursday, I'll be working with you in an interactive way. So Brandon will be working with you, and we'll be saying, Brandon, where's your pitch? Where's your pitch? So I'm gonna take a question from. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, thank you.
I'm teasing you a little bit. There is more to come. I'm going to take a question from Canon, and then Isaac. And I still see you, Isaac. So I want to come back to you, Isaac, and we're going to do this 1 minute, 1 minute thing. So, and Grey Church, thank you so much for your comments. Really, really appreciate that. Thank you. That's very kind of you. Thank you. Canon, fire.
When you're trying,
did you see that? Canon, fire.
When you're trying to sell something, but you want to build a relationship first, because it's so easy to like hear salespeople just turn off immediately. How can you use language that both makes clear your intentions, but also shows that you're trying to build a relationship as well?
Why would you want to build a relationship?
I don't know. It seems like a better way to sell, and you're more connected to your customers.
No. It backfires. It's selling doesn't backfire. Trying to create a relationship when you don't really want a relationship because you want to sell, that backfires. So you gotta. I can't believe I'm using the word backfire with a Canon. But the thing you got to be careful of is you actually do have to think about, what are you trying to do here? We're all adults. People love to be treated like adults. And if you're there to sell. If you're there to build a relationship because that will help you with your sales, be transparent about that as well. And you could say, I'd like to get to know your needs better. I'd like to understand you better, because what we found is if we don't understand your needs really well, the product won't meet your needs. The product is highly customized, or it comes in loads of different variations, and the happiest customers have always been ones where we've understood them. People will understand that and they will respect that. What they won't respect is, hey, let me pick on someone. Hey, Jake Grandy. Hey, Jake, how are you doing? Have you been on holiday recently? Says somebody in 2020. I know the answer to that. That's a really terrible question. Jake, do you have any children?
I do.
Great children. They're adorable, aren't they? How old are your kids?
They're not adorable. They're 13 and 10.
Oh my goodness, Jake. Oh my goodness, Jake. And then I would just try to build this fake relationship with Jake based on me somehow identifying with him because we've both got kids or something. Most people will find some point of mutual interest, but it's a fake relationship. Whereas actually what's far more interesting is if I try to understand how what I'm doing might help Jake's needs, etc. And there's a book called Spin Selling, written by a guy called Neil Rackham, who talks about consultative selling, where you're not trying to build a relationship, but you're trying to ask a series of questions so you really do understand the point. The point of the what your customers are, and that's the relationship. So don't be exploitative, Canon. If you want to build a relationship, build a relationship. But if you want to sell. It's okay. Just be honest about it and have the confidence that I have a great product that will help you and I want to sell it to you. Austin.
Awesome. Really quick. So, are you involved with Startup Junkies?
I love Startup Junkie. My good friend Jamarain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard of them. I was just asking. My father introduced me to the podcast once, and I was intrigued.
Yeah, they're all good people. I think genuinely, I think a lot of ecosystems have bad players. I think one of the reasons I absolutely love Arkansas is you have this great ecosystem. Everyone's playing together. Everyone plays well together. There's no bonfire of the egos. Everybody knows everybody. We work very well together in Arkansas. It's a really great. There's a call that I think still might happen every Tuesday morning with all the ecosystem players. They all get together. They all talk about how can we help you, the clients, with your needs. So it's a really joined up, very client focused. It's a really great. I love the work that's being done in Arkansas. There are loads of other places where I could tell you ecosystems aren't so joined up. But yeah, I've always seen very good agency and very good ethical behavior by all the players in the Arkansas ecosystem. So there is no one that I wouldn't recommend you to go with.
Yeah, and if I can suggest a resource, actually, I think I've recognized some of the points you've made from a book I read once, much earlier in life, called Thank You for Arguing by I think it's Heinrichsen. Really good suggestion of a book for you all.
Thank you. If you could write that in a textbook, because I will actually take you up on that. By the way, if something's being recorded, don't send private messages to people on Zoom, because if you record, I should have said this at the beginning, if you're doing a recording and you're sending private messages to people, it comes up in the recording. So just be careful. I should have said at the beginning. So don't send any private messages, because I've had a few private messages, which is great and nothing embarrassing whatsoever. But it will, if you want something to be private, it won't be private in a recording, just something for you.
That's great advice, Permjot. And I'm just gonna interrupt real quick. It is 5:32. So if anyone does need to go there, feel free. Permjot, are you okay staying on?
Yeah, I just want Isaac. I want to listen to Isaac. This is the build-up. Isaac.
Great. Wait, real quick. For those of you who have to leave, if you could just remember tomorrow, Permjot is talking, same time, same place. Get the link, sign up. It's in the text box, as Permjot calls it. Also, just take our survey if you don't mind letting us know. We want to hear how these workshops are going, and your feedback is important. Okay, back to Permjot. Stay on as long as you can.
Perfect. Hello? What's happened?
We're still here.
Oh, I think I pressed the what's happened? I can't see anybody. Oh my gosh, what's happened? What's happened? There we go. There we are. I'm back. It was the link. It was the link, because I've already ordered the book. That's how quick the technology is. So thank you very much for that. So Isaac.
Yes, sir.
Over to you, mate. The old China.
So the only thing I could think of is it was a YouTube video with think Jay-Z and Warren Buffett. And basically they were talking about like investment things. And Warren Buffett, he told him, he said, never invest in something that you don't know about. So Jay-Z, with him, I guess, knowing about the music business and other things that's associated with the music business, he was able to invest or make better investments because of that.
Isaac, brilliant. That was genuinely worth the wait. That was genuinely worth the wait. And actually, Isaac, we could to make it relevant to some of the people. You can actually thank you, Dr. Reeves. Thank you very much. We can actually reverse that, Isaac. You shouldn't want an investor who doesn't know anything about your business. Getting an investor is a bit like getting a mortgage. You're just so grateful that someone's going to give you money. You don't do the due diligence the other way around. You just say, oh my God, someone's going to give me money. Great. I remember when I got my first mortgage, I didn't even think about the price of the mortgage. Was there competition? I just couldn't believe somebody was stupid enough to lend me money to buy a house. I was like, yeah, I'll sign it. And then when you do your second or third mortgage, you're like, wow, hang on, I'm going to shop around. I'm going to get myself a good deal. Same thing with investment. Don't get investment. I mean, I talked about the sandwich business I was in, the restaurant. We had this investor and they wanted to have a say in the sandwiches we produced. They wanted to design sandwiches for us. It was a nightmare having that investor, because everybody knows about food, right? Everybody knows about food. I mean, you know, because I eat sandwiches every day, so I'm a bit of an expert. Oh my gosh, you know, so be careful that you don't get investors that want to get involved but don't actually know about your business. It's a terrible thing. So Isaac, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So I'm actually going to say thank you very much. So Cannon, great to see you again. Well done on all the great success you're enjoying. Kennedy, thank you very much. I think I saw a dog make a guest appearance as well. Always good. Pets are always welcome on these shows as well. So thank you very much. Alexandria McLeod, great to see you.